My name is Natalie Chambers, and on my 28th birthday, my father insisted I sign over my $500,000 inheritance to my stepsister, Lily. Your mother would have wanted this, he said, while Lily sat beside him, wearing diamond jewelry bought with credit. I was the overlooked daughter, standing in the shadow of the favored one. When I refused, their disappointment turned into something worse. They tried to have me declared mentally unfit. I stayed quiet while they schemed, until I handed them an envelope that changed everything. Before I explain what happened, let me know where you're watching from. Hit like and subscribe if you've ever had to protect yourself from family who tried to take advantage. Growing up, I never questioned whether I was loved. My mother, Catherine, was everything to me, a brilliant financial advisor who taught me independence and the value of money. She survived breast cancer when I was 10, and that shaped her approach to life. Always have your own safety net. Nat, she would say, no matter how much you care about someone, protect yourself first. We were a small, close-knit family, Mom, Dad, and me. Dad worked in real estate development. He didn't have Mom's financial skills, but they balanced each other. I remember our weekends at the lake, playing board games, and Dad helping me learn to ride my bike. Just ordinary, happy memories. But everything changed when Mom's cancer returned when I was 16. This time, it was aggressive. She passed away within 6 months. I was heartbroken, clinging to memories of her voice, her laugh, and how she'd tuck my hair behind my ear when she was proud of me. What I didn't know was that Mom had been preparing for that possibility. She created a trust fund for me that would be available when I turned 28. It contained $500,000 her life insurance, investments, and inherited family money all earmarked just for me. Dad knew about it but couldn't access it. It was protected, with clear instructions that it was meant for my future. For about 3 months after Mom's death, Dad seemed truly Then Monica came into our lives. Monica was everything my mother wasn't loud where Mom was thoughtful, flashy where Mom was graceful, demanding where Mom was calm. She had been Dad's assistant at work, and I later learned their relationship began during my mother's illness. They married just 8 months after Mom passed. With Monica came her daughter Lily, who was my age, which only made things more awkward. I was quiet and focused on my studies. Lily was outgoing, always dressed in designer clothes, and had a knack for getting what she wanted, especially from my father. The change in Dad was immediate. The man who once celebrated my academic achievements barely seemed to notice me anymore. He showered Lily with attention, praised her average grades, and gave her a car for her 17th birthday. When I turned 17, I got a check for college expenses. Lily's just more sensitive than you, Natalie, he'd say. You've always been independent, like your mother. Lily needs more help. By the time I finished high school, I felt like a guest in my own home. I earned a scholarship to a state university, 2 hours away, and rarely came back except during holidays. Working part-time and doing internships, I supported myself through school. Meanwhile, Lily attended a private college completely funded by my dad. She joined a sorority, drove a new car, and shared endless photos from vacations and shopping, trips all financed by him. I majored in finance, like my mother, and after graduation, landed a job at a respected firm in the city. I rented a modest apartment, saved carefully, and moved forward one step at a time. I worked long hours, volunteered for extra projects, and gradually moved up. Family gatherings became more awkward over time. My practical lifestyle contrasted sharply with Lily's luxury. Still driving that old car, Natalie, Lily would say, twirling keys to the newest car Dad had bought her. It gets me where I need to go, I'd reply, never mentioning I had no debt unlike her, who'd never paid a bill. 2 months before my 28th birthday, received a letter from the trust manager my mother had chosen. The inheritance would be released on my birthday, just as she had arranged. Inside was also a note from Mom. My dearest Natalie, if you're reading this, I'm not there to see the woman you've become. This money reflects my love and hopes for your future. Use it wisely, but don't forget to enjoy life too. I'm so proud of you. Love always. Mom, I cried for hours. It felt like a final embrace from her. I started planning carefully, investing in a small business I'd researched, putting a down payment on a modest home, and saving for retirement. Every step aligned with what my mother would have wanted. But while I was planning my future, my father, Monica, and Lily were planning something else entirely. We want to host your birthday dinner, Dad said over the phone, 3 weeks before my birthday. It's a big year. I was surprised. Birthdays hadn't mattered much in the Chambers-Mitchell household for years. The previous year, he sent a text and a generic gift card still with the activation sticker. That's thoughtful, but it's not necessary. I replied, nonsense. He said, you only turned 28 once. His choice of words struck me as odd. Most people don't treat 28 as a major milestone. Still, I agreed to dinner. Part of me hoped he genuinely wanted to reconnect. I arrived at their newest mansion, the third one since Dad married Monica on my birthday evening. The place was all show. Marble floors, crystal chandeliers, expensive but uncomfortable furniture. My old Civic looked out of place beside Dad's Mercedes and Monica's Range Rover. Dad greeted me with an overly cheerful hug. There's my birthday girl, he said, like we always celebrated together. Monica air kissed the air beside my cheeks, careful not to smudge her makeup. Natalie, that outfit is practical, she said, while she wore a dress that probably cost more than 3 months of my rent. The dining room was decorated with a few tired balloons and a store-bought cake. At least this time, my name was spelled right, which was more than I could say for previous years. A small stack of wrapped gifts sat neatly on a side table. Is anyone else coming? I asked, noticing the dining table was set for 5. Just us, Lily, and her new boyfriend, Travis, Dad replied. A quiet family dinner. Right on. Cue. The front door opened, and Lily's laughter echoed through the foyer. She entered like a celebrity on a red carpet, tossing her luxury handbag onto an empty chair. She wore a fitted red dress, sparkling diamond earrings, and a tennis bracelet that looked fresh from the jewelry case. Happy birthday, sis, she said with a quick hug, leaving a strong trail of expensive perfume behind. You look nice. Her eyes quickly scanned my simple blue dress, something I'd picked up from a department store. Travis followed behind her. He was tall, classically handsome, and clearly someone who spent plenty of time at the gym. He gave me a firm handshake and a well-rehearsed smile. So you're the smart sister, he said, a statement that felt like both a compliment and a quiet dig at my appearance. We moved to the living room for drinks before dinner. As we made small talk, I noticed quick, subtle glances exchanged between Dad and Monica. When Dad handed me a glass of wine, his hand trembled slightly. Lily dominated the conversation, going on about her new job at a boutique marketing firm, where it sounded like she did very little work for a surprisingly high salary. Dad pulled some strings with the owner, she said without a hint of embarrassment. I mentioned my recent promotion and the team I was managing, but Dad quickly turned the topic to Travis's golf game. As we moved to the dining room, I noticed my gifts remained untouched on the side table. No one suggested I open them. We'll do presents after dinner, Monica said, following my gaze. After we've had our discussion, the word discussion hung in the air, heavy and ominous. A knot started forming in my stomach. During the appetizer, the mood was tense. Dad kept glancing at his watch. Monica had already refilled her wine glass 3 times. Lily and Travis whispered to each other when they thought no one was looking. On a short trip to the bathroom, I overheard voices from the dining room. Just make sure she knows there's no other choice, Dad said. But what if she refuses? Monica replied. They fell quiet as I walked back in. During the main course, Lily suddenly excused herself. When she returned, her eyes were red. Though her makeup remained untouched, Travis placed a hand over hers, offering a silent show of support. Everything okay? I asked, genuinely concerned. Everything's fine, Dad answered before Lily could speak. Let's enjoy this wonderful meal Monica has put together. But nothing about the dinner felt enjoyable. It felt more like waiting for bad news in a doctor's office. The conversation was awkward. The laughter felt forced. No one asked how I felt about turning 28 or said anything about my mother who should have been there. Once the plates were cleared and the cake was brought out, Dad gently tapped his spoon against his water glass. The sound rang out sharply, silencing the room. Before we cut the cake, I'd like to make a toast, he said, rising from his seat. To Natalie, on her 28th birthday, a day your mother and I looked forward to from the moment you were born. He paused, making eye contact with me. As you know, today is important not just because it marks another year, but because it's the day you gain access to your inheritance. And just like that, the real reason behind this carefully planned birthday dinner was out in the open. Family, he continued, raising his glass, means being there for one another during hard times. And being an adult often means making sacrifices for those you love. My heart sank. This wasn't a family gathering, it was a setup. Dad remained standing, glass still in hand, but his tone had shifted. His face, once smiling, now looked serious. Natalie, we need to talk about Lily. Right on cue, Lily let out a small sob. Travis wrapped his arm around her shoulders protectively. What's going on? I asked, looking around the table. Dad took a breath. Lily's in trouble. Serious trouble. I didn't mean for it to get this bad, Lily said, tears now streaming. Though somehow her makeup stayed flawless, it started out as just fun. Lily has a gambling problem, Dad explained. She's tried to manage it on her own, but things have gotten worse. I'm getting help, Lily said quickly, clinging to Travis's hand. I've joined a support group. Monica reached over and gently patted Lily's other hand. We're very proud of her for taking steps to get better, Dad continued. The problem is, she owes a lot of money to people who don't take IOUs. How much? I asked, already fearing the answer. 500,000, he said, not looking away. The exact amount of my inheritance. How convenient. These aren't people who can be bargained with, Dad added. They've already made threats against Lily and against us. We're scared, Natalie. I'm terrified, Lily said, her voice shaking. They know where we all live, and that's why we're having this conversation tonight, Dad said, his tone shifting into full business mode. Your inheritance became available today. We need that money to settle the debt, to keep this family safe. The family safe. The room was silent. All eyes were on me waiting. You want me to hand over my entire inheritance? To Lily? I asked calmly. Despite the rising anger, not give. Dad corrected. Loan, she'll pay you back? Every penny, Lily added, nodding eagerly. Once I'm back on track. And how exactly would you repay $500,000? I asked. With your part-time marketing job? We could set up a payment plan, Dad suggested, as if that solved everything. The most important thing is dealing with this situation right away, Nora said, evoking our mother's memory like she had any claim to it. You know, she always said family comes first. My mother said a lot of things. I replied calmly, like don't enable destructive behavior, and that actions have consequences. My father's face grew stern. This isn't about teaching Rachel a lesson, it's about protecting her hand, protecting all of us. I find it strange, I said, that in 10 years, you've never once mentioned Rachel had a gambling problem, especially not one so severe. She's now $500,000 in debt. It only started recently, Nora responded quickly, yet she's showing off new diamond earrings and a bracelet, I pointed out. Shouldn't those be sold to cover her debts? Those are family heirlooms, Nora said, faltering. Which you bought last month, I replied. Rachel posted about them on Instagram thanking Dad for the early birthday gift. My father's expression darkened. The point is, we need that money today. I've already contacted the trust manager to expedite the transfer as soon as you sign the authorization. You contacted my trust manager, I asked, stunned, without even speaking to me first. There wasn't time, he said, firmly. The people she owes want their money now. Who are these people? I asked. If Rachel's being threatened, shouldn't we go to the police? We can't involve the authorities, Dad said, brushing it off. That would only complicate things. He pulled out a folder from beside his chair and slid it across the table. The paperwork is ready. All you need to do is sign. I opened the folder. Inside was a transfer authorization form for the full $500,000 and a loosely written loan agreement, missing repayment terms, interest rates, or any accountability measures. You can't be serious, I said, closing the folder. This isn't a request, Dad said quietly. Rachel's life might be at risk. My life might be at risk, Rachel added, dramatically. You don't need that money, Nora said. You have a good job, no dependents. Rachel needs this to survive. I looked around the table. Dad, certain I'd give in like I always had. Nora, smug and confident her daughter's needs would once again come first. Rachel, with her fake tears and sense of entitlement. Even Tyler, practically a stranger, observing as my family tried to strip me of my financial security. No, I said. The room fell silent. What did you just say? Dad asked, stunned. I said no. I'm not signing my inheritance over to Rachel. Rachel's tears vanished, replaced by shock and then anger. You're selfish. They'll kill me. Samantha, be reasonable, Dad snapped, his calm facade breaking. She's my stepsister, I corrected him. Someone I barely know, because for the past decade you've treated me like a guest in my own family. After everything we've done for you, Nora said through clenched teeth. What exactly have you done? I asked, genuinely curious. Since marrying my father, what support have you actually offered me? We're family, Dad insisted, ignoring my question. And in this family, we help each other. Interesting how that principle never applied when I was the one who needed help, I replied, standing up. I'm leaving. Happy birthday to me. If you walk out that door, Dad warned, you're no longer part of this family. I looked him in the eyes. I haven't been part of this family. Since Mom died, I'm just admitting it now. I walked out, leaving the birthday cake untouched and a few gifts unopened on the table. As I reached my car, I heard the front door swing open. You'll regret this, Dad shouted after me. If anything happens to Rachel, it'll be on your conscience. I drove away, tears streaming down not from sadness, but from pure rage. That money wasn't just a sum, it was my mother's final gift, her way of protecting me when she couldn't do it herself. And they tried to take it from me without a second thought. The days after that disastrous birthday dinner were unnervingly quiet. No calls from Dad, no texts from Rachel. Even Nora, usually quick with passive ogress's messages, was silent. I should have felt relieved, but instead, I was unsettled. This wasn't them giving up, it was them regrouping. I was right to worry. Days after my birthday, I left work to find my father waiting beside my car in the office parking garage. We need to talk, he said. Serious. Not here, let's go somewhere private. Whatever you have to say it here, I said, keeping my distance. He sighed, playing the disappointed father. I was hoping we could handle this peacefully. He reached into his briefcase and pulled out a thick envelope. These are legal documents I'll be filing tomorrow. I wanted to give you one last chance to cooperate. I took the envelope but didn't open it. What kind of documents? A petition for guardianship, he said flatly, claiming, you're mentally unfit to manage your finances. My blood ran cold. You can't be serious. Your mother had several episodes of depression after her first cancer diagnosis, he continued. It's in her medical records. Mental illness can be hereditary. You've shown increasing paranoia, irrational decisions, emotional instability, all signs of a similar issue. That's completely false, I said, shaking with anger. Is it? He asked. You accused us of lying about a serious threat with no proof. You've isolated yourself for years. You refused to help your sister in a crisis. A judge could see that as concerning. Get away from me, I said, gripping my car keys tightly. This can all go away, he said softly. Just sign over the inheritance and we'll forget this happened. I got into my car without replying and drove straight to Martin Sullivan, my mother's attorney, who had helped establish my trust. His office was closing, but his assistant let me in after seeing how distressed I was. He's saying I'm not mentally competent, I explained, handing Martin the documents. He wants control of the trust. Martin looked through the papers, his expression growing darker with each page. This is aggressive. He's built quite a case: statements from family, a psychiatric report from a doctor you've never seen, and so-called examples of unstable behavior. None of this is true, I said firmly. I believe you, Martin said, but these allegations, even if false, are serious. False claims can lead to serious legal complications. Courts tread carefully when mental competency is questioned. Even if we eventually prove your father wrong, he could still manage to have your assets frozen while the court evaluates the case, Martin explained. So, he might actually block my access to the inheritance, I asked, stunned. At least temporarily, yes. Why would he go this far? I asked, still trying to process everything. Is Rachel's gambling debt really worth destroying his relationship with me forever? Martin hesitated. Samantha, I wasn't going to bring this up until I had more concrete information, but this isn't the first time your father has attempted something like this. With who? I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. Your maternal grandmother, he said. After your mother passed, there was a disagreement over a piece of property your mother had inherited from her parents. Your father claimed your mother had promised it to him before she died. When your grandmother refused to hand it over, he threatened legal action, very similar to what he's doing now. I felt a wave of nausea. What happened? She came to me for help. We fought it, and ultimately your father backed down, but it got ugly. She never spoke to him again. Why didn't anyone tell me? I asked. You were 17, Martin said gently. Everyone wanted to shield you from the fallout. He exhaled slowly. There's more. After reviewing the documents your father submitted, I made a few discreet calls. This isn't about gambling debts. Then what is it? I asked. From what I've gathered, your father and Nora have been living well beyond their means for years. His real estate business took a hit during the last recession. They've refinanced their home twice. They're maxed out on multiple credit cards. And while Rachel has been spending a fortune, it's not on gambling, it's been on designer items, vacations, and cosmetic work. So they're just broke, I said, trying to absorb the reality. It looks that way. And your inheritance may be the only thing standing between them and bankruptcy. I leaned back, overwhelmed. What do I do now? First, we secure your inheritance immediately, Martin said. We'll transfer the funds to accounts completely inaccessible to them, even if a court temporarily restricts your assets. Then, we gather all available evidence to disprove the guardianship claim letters from your employer and friends, a clean psychiatric evaluation from a licensed doctor, and then we prepare for battle, he said, his voice firm, because your father doesn't look like he's going to stop. In the weeks that followed, my life became surreal. I was formally served with notice that my father had filed for guardianship. I was ordered to undergo a psychiatric evaluation, which I passed without issue. My boss submitted a letter vouching for my exceptional performance and sound judgment. Friends came forward to describe me as stable, responsible, and mentally healthy. I also hired a private investigator, and what he uncovered was worse than I imagined. Rachel's so-called gambling addiction was entirely fabricated. Credit card records revealed she had spent hundreds of thousands of dollars over 5 years on luxury goods, international travel, and elective medical procedures. My father and Nora had bankrolled her lifestyle while draining their own savings and amassing debt. More disturbingly, I wasn't the first relative they had tried this with. After my grandmother, they targeted 2 of my mother's cousins, both of whom had received smaller inheritances. One caved under pressure and signed over the money. The other fought and won, but not without personal and financial cost. There was a clear pattern of calculated exploitation of family ties for financial gain, and I was next on their list. The stress was relentless. I lost sleep. I lost weight. I flinched every time my phone rang. But to my surprise, support came from places I didn't expect. My colleagues offered kind words and encouragement. Old friends I hadn't heard from in years reached out. Even Aunt Sarah, my grandmother's sister who I barely knew, called to say she would support me financially, emotionally. However I needed. Your mother would be so proud of you for standing up to them, she said. Eleanor always saw that Richard had flaws, but she loved him anyway. She'd be devastated by what he's become, but proud of the woman you are. As the evidence stacked up and our case grew stronger, I made a decision. I wouldn't just defend myself. I would expose everything, the manipulation, the deceit, the long history of exploiting family members. With Martin and the investigators' help, I compiled a meticulous file, financial statements, legal documents, witness letters, and even recordings of my father and Nora discussing their plans. Legally obtained, these recordings revealed their intentions in unambiguous terms. I had my mother's original will with clear instructions about how the inheritance was to be handled. I had a sworn statement from the doctor listed in the guardianship petition. He confirmed he'd never met me and that his signature had been forged. I had screenshots of Rachel's purchases on the day she claimed to be fearing for her life. She had been shopping, not hiding from dangerous people. The most incriminating evidence came from an audio clip of my father speaking with a business associate. He detailed how he needed to gain control of Samantha's money before she wastes it, and how it would clear the debts and give us a fresh start. All of this filled what I started referring to as the envelope, though it had expanded into an overstuffed accordion file. The final piece arrived unexpectedly when Rachel's ex-boyfriend, Tyler, reached out. They had broken up, and he was angry about being manipulated. There was never a gambling problem, he said. She made it up. She told me exactly what to say at your birthday dinner. There were no threats, no loan sharks. It was all a plan to scare you into giving them the money. His statement, notarized and added to the file, was the final nail in their legal coffin. With everything ready, I prepared for the final confrontation. Martin and I spent the next 3 weeks going over every detail. His approach was strategic and precise. Documentation is everything, he reminded me. Court steel and facts, not feelings. We began with my own financial records. I compiled bank statements showing responsible savings habits, investment accounts with consistent growth, and a clean history of on-time payments. It painted a picture of someone fully capable of managing their finances. Next came professional records. My supervisor, Jessica, wrote a comprehensive letter about my role, recent promotion, and fiscal judgment. Samantha is one of the most rational and capable professionals I've worked with, she wrote. She regularly handles complex financial decisions with confidence. 3 additional coworkers submitted letters echoing her remarks. I included performance reviews from the past 5 years, all glowing. For character references, 5 close friends submitted statements highlighting my level-headedness and consistent behavior. My neighbor, a retired psychologist, wrote a particularly compelling letter detailing our regular conversations and his informal, professional observation. In my 4 decades of practice, he wrote, I've encountered many individuals struggling with competency. Samantha exhibits none of those signs. Rather than displaying any of the behaviors they accused me of, I showed strong emotional intelligence and sound judgment. With my own defense in place, I shifted focus to investigating my father's claims. The psychiatric evaluation he submitted was allegedly prepared by Dr. Harold Winters. Through Martin's connections, we discovered that Dr. Winters had retired 2 years earlier and now lived in Arizona. A quick call confirmed he had never met me, let alone evaluated me. Someone forged my signature, he said, clearly outraged. I'll submit a sworn statement confirming that immediately. The forged document alone was enough to significantly weaken my father's case. But we were far from done. Martin introduced me to Michael Grayson, a financial investigator who specialized in uncovering fraud and concealed assets. Michael's expertise was exactly what we needed. Most people leave traces without realizing it, Michael explained as we sifted through financial documents in his office. Credit card charges, property deeds, tax records, they all tell a story if you know how to interpret them. And the story we uncovered was one of mounting financial pressure. My father's real estate firm had been declining for years. He had borrowed heavily before the last market crash, and when it came, he was left with unfinished projects and spiraling debt. Instead of reducing their spending, he and Nora tried to maintain their image, taking out multiple mortgages, opening new credit lines, and even borrowing against his life insurance policy. Rachel's spending habits were staggering. In the past year alone, she had charged a $12,000 Chanel purse, over $45,000 in high-end clothing, $30,000 in jewelry including those so-called heirlooms, 5 luxury spa retreats averaging $5,000 each, a $35,000 2-week Maldives vacation, and regular cosmetic treatments totaling around $3,000 monthly. All of it charged 2 cards in my father's name. There's no gambling issue, Michael said firmly. I checked casino records and online gaming databases. There's no evidence she or anyone in your household engaged in significant gambling. So the entire story was made up, I asked, though I already knew. Completely, he confirmed. It was just a convenient excuse for why they needed access to your trust so urgently. Our investigation also turned up more examples of my father's past manipulations. After my grandmother, he went after my mother's cousin Edward, claiming there had been a verbal agreement to invest together. Edward gave up his $75,000 inheritance to help the family and never saw it again. Another cousin, Patricia, had fought back when he made similar claims against her. He threatened legal action, but her attorney presented solid evidence, and he eventually dropped it. Both relatives were willing to share their stories. Patricia, who hadn't spoken to my father in nearly a decade, told me, I tried warning your grandmother after your mom passed, but she was too trusting. Eleanor was, too. They wanted to believe Richard was better than he really was. But the most revealing discovery came through legal discovery, which gave us access to my father's emails. In one exchange with Nora, just days before my birthday, he wrote, "Once we control Samantha's trust, we'll pay down the credit cards and the second mortgage. That should buy us time. Rachel needs to cool it with spending until things calm down." Nora replied, "What if she won't sign? She's just as stubborn as Eleanor was." Then we moved to Plan B. My father wrote, "The guardianship petition. I've already talked to Dr. Reynolds. He still owes me for that Anderson project, but she doesn't seem unstable." Nora replied, "Doesn't matter," he answered. "Even if it doesn't succeed, the process freezes her assets while the court decides. That gives us leverage." She caved before going through a public court fight. Reading those cold, calculated messages from my own father made me physically ill. I had to step outside Michael's office to catch my breath. "I'm sorry," Michael said when I returned. "I know that wasn't easy." "It's not," I admitted, "but now I know for sure this wasn't some misunderstanding. It was a calculated, deliberate attempt to take what my mother left for me." As our investigation continued, we were contacted by Tyler, Rachel's now ex-boyfriend. Their relationship had ended shortly after my birthday dinner, and he was eager to come clean. "It was all staged," he admitted during a meeting at Martin's office. "Rachel told me what to say, how to act like she was scared. There was no debt, no danger. She even laughed afterward, saying you'd fall for it like always." Tyler provided text messages showing Rachel's coaching and her frustrations when their plan failed. "Samantha was supposed to be the easy one," she wrote. "Dad said she always folds under pressure." Armed with all this, I scheduled a comprehensive psychiatric evaluation with Dr. Catherine Jenkins, a respected and independent psychiatrist, recommended by Martin. After multiple interviews and assessments, her findings were clear. I was mentally sound. On her report, Dr. Jenkins wrote, "Ms. Reynolds demonstrates strong emotional resilience, especially given the strained family dynamics. Her decision to protect her inheritance reflects healthy boundaries, not instability." By the end of the 3-week investigation, our accordion file was overflowing. Inside was proof of my financial responsibility, evidence that the psychiatric evaluation had been forged, documentation of my father's growing debt and financial troubles, records of Rachel's excessive personal spending, testimonies from relatives who had faced similar schemes, emails detailing the calculated plan to seize my trust, Tyler's sworn statement about the staged intervention, Dr. Jenkins's professional analysis of my mental health, and my mother's original letter detailing her clear intentions for the inheritance. The contrast between her loving message and my father's betrayal could not have been more stark. "What happens next?" I asked Martin during our final strategy session. "Your father has called for a family meeting to discuss your condition." He replied, "He's invited extended relatives promptly to create pressure or sway support." "And we're going to this setup?" I asked. Martin gave a rare smile. "Yes, because it's the ideal time to present everything, not just in court, but in front of the very people he's been manipulating. Sometimes public truth hits harder than legal consequences." "Will you come with me?" I asked. "I wouldn't miss it," he said. "Right beside you," Martin promised. "But honestly, you won't need me much. You've built a rock-solid case, Samantha, and more importantly, you've found your voice. Your mother would be proud." I left his office feeling a mix of anxiety and unexpected clarity. Everything was organized, the statements, the evidence, the truth. I had spent weeks preparing for this day, and I finally felt ready. The once bulging accordion file had been distilled into a sleek presentation folder, neatly holding only the most compelling and indisputable documents. I tucked it carefully into my briefcase, alongside the original copies of my mother's will and trust paperwork. Tomorrow, I would confront my father, Nora, and Rachel, and nothing would ever be the same. The family meeting was scheduled for Saturday afternoon at my Aunt Sarah's home. Dad claimed it was a neutral location, though I suspected he chose it for the illusion of broader family support. I arrived 15 minutes early with Martin. We sat in the car going over our approach one final time. "Stay composed, no matter what they say," Martin advised. "Let the evidence do the talking. Don't react emotionally, they'll try to use it against you." "I understand," I said. My heart was pounding, but I nodded. "I'm ready." Aunt Sarah greeted us at the door, concern written all over her face. She hadn't been told the real purpose of the gathering, only that there were serious concerns about my mental state. "I can't believe Richard would go this far," she whispered, pulling me into a hug. "Your mother would be outraged." "It's okay," I told her softly. "Just let it unfold." Inside, the living room had been arranged like a hearing. 2 sofas faced a single chair clearly intended for me. My father, Nora, and Rachel sat on one sofa. The other was partially filled by my cousin Thomas and his wife Beth, both looking uneasy. Uncle James, my mother's brother, stood near the window, expression guarded. Dad stood as I entered with Martin. "This is a family meeting," he said, eyeing Martin with visible irritation. "There's no need for legal counsel." "Martin is here as a family friend," I replied calmly. "He knew my mother for over 20 years. He stays." Dad looked like he wanted to protest, but didn't push it. Fine, please. Samantha, have a seat. I took the chair positioned in the center of the room, placing my briefcase beside me. Martin stood silently behind me, steady, reassuring. We've brought you all here today because we're extremely worried about Samantha. Dad began, addressing the group. Lately, she's shown troubling signs: paranoia, erratic choices, poor judgment very similar to Eleanor during her illness. The mention of my mother in that context ignited a quiet fury in me, but I kept my expression neutral. She's isolated herself from family, refused reasonable support, and become dangerously fixated on her inheritance, he continued. We're pursuing temporary guardianship out of love. We just want to help her get back on track, Nora added with artificial concern. We're seriously worried, sis, Rachel chimed in, nodding gravely. Dad pulled out a folder. These are documents outlining Samantha's worrying behavior from family, and a psychiatric assessment recommending guardianship. He handed copies to Uncle James and Cousin Thomas, who began flipping through them, visibly disturbed. This is serious, Uncle James said, looking over the papers. Samantha, have you seen these? I have, I replied steadily. Would you like to hear my response? Of course, Aunt Sarah said quickly. That's why we're here. I inhaled deeply and spoke with a calm I hadn't known. I possessed. For years, I allowed my father and his new family to dismiss me, undermine me, and make me question my reality. But not today. Everything in that folder is false. I pulled a page from my briefcase and handed it to Uncle James. The psychiatric report? Forged. The doctor listed Dr. Harold Winters has never met or evaluated me. He now lives in Arizona and has signed a sworn statement confirming the signature on that evaluation isn't his. Dad's face lost color. That can't be right. There must be a misunderstanding. There's no mistake, I said. Dr. Winters retired 2 years ago. I spoke to him myself, and he was outraged. His name was being used in this way. Even if there was a paperwork issue, Nora began quickly. Is it just paperwork? I interrupted, turning to face her. Or is it something else entirely? I handed out another document, a financial summary prepared by Michael Grayson. This is a detailed overview of my father and Nora's finances, I explained. They are over $700,000 in debt. Their home has been mortgaged twice, they've maxed out multiple credit cards, and my father's business is nearing collapse. This is a gross invasion of privacy, my father snapped. Martin stepped in when someone tries to take over another person's finances. Their own financial position becomes highly relevant, especially when there's evidence that financial desperation may be the real motive. I turned next to Rachel and the story about your gambling problem. Also, untrue. I handed out her credit card statements. There's no trace of gambling, but there is plenty of evidence of luxury shopping, vacations, and designer jewelry, all charged 2 credit cards in my father's name. Rachel's face turned red. You had no right to dig through my expenses. I didn't have to, I replied. These are accounts under Dad's name. He's legally liable and clearly hoped to pay them off with my inheritance. The room fell quiet. Uncle James kept flipping through the reports, brows furrowed. Thomas stared at the papers in disbelief. Aunt Sarah wiped away a tear. There's more, I said, pulling out one final document. This is an email exchange between my father and Nora, dated 3 days before my birthday. It outlines their plan to pressure me into signing over my inheritance and, if that failed, to file for guardianship to freeze my assets, I said, handing the email to Uncle James. He read it silently before passing it to Cousin Thomas. The concern in their faces quickly turned to anger. Is this true, Richard? Uncle James demanded. Dad's face went pale. Those emails are taken out of context. What context could possibly justify this? Aunt Sarah asked, her voice trembling with anger. You tried to steal Eleanor's legacy meant for her daughter. That's not stealing, Dad insisted, his voice rising. Family helps family. Eleanor would have wanted this. Don't presume to know what my sister would have wanted. Uncle James cut in sharply. Eleanor set up that trust specifically to protect Samantha's future, apparently even from you. I reached into my briefcase one last time and pulled out a sealed envelope my mother had left with her will. I had never opened it until now. My mother left this letter to be read. If there was ever a dispute about her intentions for the inheritance, I explained, Martin has kept it safe all these years. With steady hands, I broke the seal and unfolded the letter. To whom it may concern, I read aloud, if this letter is being read, then questions have arisen regarding my wishes for the trust fund I established for my daughter, Samantha. Let me be absolutely clear. This money is solely for Samantha's future. It is not intended for Richard, any future spouse he may have, or any step-siblings Samantha might acquire. While I hope Samantha will always be generous, I do not expect or want her to compromise her financial security for the benefit of others. I paused, my voice catching slightly before continuing. I have made separate provisions for Richard through life insurance and shared assets. If he has mismanaged those resources, that is not Samantha's burden to bear. My daughter deserves the chance to build her life on solid ground, free from financial pressure or manipulation. This is my final wish as her mother, Eleanor Reynolds. Silence filled the room. My mother's words lingered as if she were standing there beside me, protective and unwavering. Dad stared at the floor, unable to meet anyone's eyes. Diane looked furious but said nothing. Rebecca seemed stunned that their entire scheme had collapsed. I believe this meeting is over, Martin said quietly. Not quite, I replied, gathering my documents and packing them away. There's one more thing. I turned directly to my father. You have 24 hours to withdraw the guardianship petition. If you don't, everything I've presented today will be sent to the district attorney. The forged psychiatric evaluation alone is fraud. The emails show clear premeditation. Dad's head snapped up. You wouldn't. I absolutely would, I assured him. I've spent most of my life trying to earn your approval, even after you made it clear I'd always come second, to Rebecca. But I'm done with that now. My mother protected me the best way she knew how. I won't dishonor her by failing to protect myself. I stood, feeling lighter than I had in years. This is the end of our relationship, I said, firmly. Not because you wanted my money though, that's unforgivable, but because you were willing to have me declared mentally incompetent to get it. You would have destroyed my reputation, my career, possibly my entire future. I looked at Diane and Rebecca. You are equally culpable. You benefited from my father's financial support for years while treating me like an outsider. Now you've plotted to take the one thing my mother left me. Turning to the rest of the family, I added, I'm sorry you were dragged into this deception. Thank you for listening to both sides. With that, I walked out of Aunt Sarah's house, Martin at my side. I didn't look back. I didn't need to. For the first time in over a decade, I had spoken my truth and stood my ground. The weight I hadn't realized I carried, the desperate need for my father's approval. The pain of being replaced, the self-doubt began to lift with every step. I had faced my worst fear, complete rejection by my remaining parent, and survived. Not just survived, but emerged victorious on my own terms. As we reached the car, Martin smiled at me. Your mother would be incredibly proud of you today, Samantha. I know, I said softly, and for the first time I truly believed it. The aftermath unfolded quickly. Dad withdrew the guardianship petition the next morning, as I demanded. No apology, just a terse email from his lawyer confirming the withdrawal. I hadn't expected remorse. People capable of such manipulation rarely feel it. The withdrawal alone was enough of a victory. A week later, Diane texted me, mixing words with accusations. We only wanted what was best for the family. Someday you'll understand. I didn't reply. Some bridges, once burned, are better left as ashes. But Rebecca was more direct, sending a barrage of hostile voicemails, her anger palpable. You've ruined everything. Dad and Mom are fighting, constantly, and somehow I'm the villain. I blocked her number. Her problems were no longer mine. With the legal threat neutralized, I finally accessed my inheritance as my mother intended. Martin helped me set up protections, a revocable trust, diversified investments, and thorough documentation. The best revenge, he advised, is securing your future exactly as your mother wanted. My first priority was buying a home, a lavish estate like my father's, but a modest 3-bedroom, in a good neighborhood with a small garden my mother would have loved. Signing the closing papers, I felt her presence strongly. This was the security she wanted for me. Next came an investment I had been researching for years, a financial literacy program for young adults aging out of foster care. Having witnessed how financial manipulation could devastate lives, I was passionate about empowering vulnerable youth with knowledge and tools to protect themselves. Your mother's legacy, extending to help others, Martin observed when I shared my plans. Perfect symmetry. The remaining funds I invested conservatively, focusing on long-term growth, no flashy purchases or lifestyle changes. The inheritance wasn't about luxury. It was about stability and opportunity. Financial decisions made with wisdom, not emotion. As I settled into my new life, unexpected relationships blossomed from the ashes of conflict. Uncle James and Aunt Sarah, who had drifted away after Mom died, became regular presences again. We began meeting for Sunday dinners, sharing stories, and slowly rebuilding bonds once broken. We should have tried harder to stay in touch after Eleanor died, Aunt Sarah remarked during one dinner. Admitted during one of our dinners, Aunt Sarah said, we let Richard push us away when you needed family most. We all did what we thought was best at the time. I assured her, what matters is that we're here now. Cousin Patricia, who had successfully fought off my father's attempt to take her inheritance years earlier, became an unexpected mentor. Having experienced similar betrayal, she understood the complicated emotions I was processing. The hardest part, she told me during one of our long phone conversations, is accepting that they will never acknowledge the harm they caused. Your healing can't depend on their recognition of wrongdoing. She was right. I gradually stopped watching for signs of remorse or regret from my father. Instead, I focused on rebuilding my life and sense of self without a minute. The professional consequences of the conflict surprised me. Rather than damaging my career, standing up to my father's manipulation actually enhanced my professional reputation. My boss, who had provided a statement supporting my mental confidence, gained new respect for my resilience. It takes serious backbone to handle personal trauma while maintaining your professional responsibilities. she commented. During my next performance review, those are exactly the qualities we look for in leadership. 6 months after the confrontation, I was promoted to senior financial analyst. With my own team to manage, my personal growth was more subtle but profound. The experience forced me to set boundaries, speak my truth, and trust my own judgment skills I had suppressed while seeking my father's approval. I became more discerning about relationships, more comfortable stating my needs, and more confident in my decisions. Therapy helped tremendously. Dr. Jenkins, who had assessed my mental health during the legal battle, became my regular therapist. With her guidance, I worked through the complex grief of losing both parents, my mother to death, and my father to his own choices. Family estrangement carries its own form of grief, she explained during one session. You're mourning the relationship you wished you had, not just the one you lost. That perspective helped me process my feelings without drowning in them. I allowed myself to feel the sadness of losing my father without questioning my decision. To protect myself from his manipulation, 1 year after the confrontation, I received an unexpected email from Tyler, Rebecca's ex-boyfriend. He was in town for a job interview and wanted to meet for coffee. Curious, I agreed. Rebecca and your parents are getting divorced, he informed me once we were seated with our drinks. The financial situation got worse. They're selling the house, and Rebecca had to move into a studio apartment and get a real job. I felt a complicated mix of emotions, a flicker of satisfaction quickly replaced by sadness for the complete fracturing of what had once been a family. Are you telling me this thinking I'll help them? I asked directly. Tyler shook his head. No, I figured you deserved to know how the consequences have played out. You stood your ground, and they're facing reality for perhaps the first time. He paused. I admired how you handled everything. To be honest, it made me rethink some things in my own life. As our conversation continued, I realized I felt no joy in their difficulties, but also no responsibility to rescue them. They were adults facing the natural results of their choices. That wasn't vengeance, it was simply the way life worked. By my 29th birthday, a quiet celebration with friends rather than family, I had established a new normal. My home was mine. My business investment was thriving. I had created a chosen family of loyal friends and reconnected relatives. I thought often of my mother during this time of rebuilding. The inheritance had been her final gift, but the true legacy she left was the strength she had modeled throughout her life, her quiet dignity during illness, her foresight in protecting my future, her unwavering belief in my capabilities. You're more like Eleanor than you realize, Aunt Sarah told me during my birthday dinner. She's still underneath all that warmth, just like you. It was the best compliment I could have received. The final piece of my healing came unexpectedly. About 18 months after the confrontation, I was clearing out some old boxers and found a photograph I'd forgotten my father and me at the lake when I was about 9, both of us laughing as we tried to bait fishing hooks. I remembered that day clearly, the sun warm on my shoulders, the comfortable silence between casts, his patient instructions as I struggled with the fishing line. For a moment, grief overwhelmed me, not just for my mother, whose absence I had acknowledged and processed, but for the father I had once had, and lost long before our final confrontation. Somewhere along the way, the man who taught me to fish, cheered at my school plays, and loved my mother had disappeared. Whether consumed by greed, weakened by character flaws, or transformed by Diane's influence, that version of my father was gone as surely as if he had died. I allowed myself to cry for that loss. The complicated, messy grief of mourning someone still living but fundamentally changed, not to excuse his actions, but to acknowledge the complexity of loving and losing a flawed parent. When the tears subsided, I placed the photo in a small keepsake box, rather than returning it to storage or throwing it away. It represented a truth about my life, that love and betrayal can come from the same person, that good memories can coexist with terrible ones, and that acknowledging the former doesn't invalidate the pain of the latter. The inheritance my mother left had secured my financial future as she intended, but the true gift had been the strength I discovered in protecting it, and, by extension, protecting myself. I had learned that family isn't defined by blood or obligation, but by respect, support, and love freely given. I discovered that setting boundaries isn't selfish but necessary for genuine relationships. Most importantly, I realized my worth was never dependent on my father's recognition of it. If you're watching this and struggling with family who see you as a resource rather than a person who value what you can give them over who you are, know that you deserve better. Standing your ground may be the hardest thing you'll ever do, but also the most necessary. Your future self will thank you for it. I often wonder what my mother would think if she could see me now. I like to believe she'd recognize the daughter she raised, independent, resilient, and finally at peace with both her presence in my life and her absence from it. The money she left me provided security, but her example gave me something far more valuable: the courage to protect myself with the same fierce love she had shown in protecting me. Have you ever had to stand up to family who tried to take advantage of you? Share your story in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories of resilience and growth. Remember, sometimes the family we choose is more valuable than the family we're born into. Thank you for listening, and I wish you strength.